Is this heaven?
It's Iowa.
If you want a primer on how to heal your relationship with a dead parent, look no further than The Field of Dreams. This movie is a guide to moving non-linearly through time and to following your intuition into your own inner healing. We meet Ray Kinsella, played by Kevin Costner. In the first 5 minutes, he tells us all the facts of his life. We know his story, he has self-awareness, and he has no idea how to change the past. All he knows is that he is wounded by it. He is a New York kid who is living another person's life in Iowa. He is being responsible. He is performing for a life that he didn't really choose. We can think of it as if he is a nice, safe little part of his subconscious that he can hide away in, ignore his origins, ignore where he comes from, ignore any familial ties whatsoever, and basically latch on to his wife's life. Until, all of a sudden, he can no longer do it. At the age of 36, a voice appears. It says, "If you build it, he will come."
If you build it, he will come.
A phrase that is used and misused so many times that genuinely the original meaning has been diluted across many decades of cornfields and motivational posters. But in this story, it is very simple. The voice is his subconscious. This moment when he first hears the voice is when his psyche breaks its silence and says, you can't stay here in this safe little corner. You have to come out. This isn't your life. You are living someone else's dream, and you have a real calling to heal yourself. And so he sees a vision of a baseball field, Shoeless Joe Jackson, his father's hero, and a symbol that is completely loaded with meaning. And Ray does the spontaneous childlike thing. He plows over his cornfield and he builds a baseball field. And then he waits and he waits. And in that time period, responsibility creeps back in. Financial burdens, the magic fades, and he stops listening to his daughter, who is the symbol of his intuition within his subconscious, and the joy genuinely drains out of the decision, and he slips back into his father's life, which is burdened, anxious, trying to hold everything together, just like his father did when he was a single father raising his son. And then Shoeless Joe Jackson shows up. And this is where we see the progression of the healing that happens for Ray. Watching this movie now, with the lens of the inner work that I understand, it is genuinely astonishing to me how obvious it becomes that Ray is traveling through his subconscious, and every single person that he meets is a representation of some aspect of his psyche that needs to be healed. Through memory and symbols and through his emotional DNA of his lineage, we see all these different characters as they represent a version of his younger self, or they represent his pain. And we see how if you build it, he will come, ease his pain, and go the distance are all representations of not just Ray and his relationship with all the characters who he thinks represents those things, which is Shoeless Joe Jackson, Terrence Mann, and Archie Graham, or his father, but actually himself. If you build it, Ray, you will finally come back. You will stop denying your lineage. You will stop denying who you are. You need to ease your own pain because you're the one who's alive. You're the one who's living. And you're the one who has to understand and deal with the guilt that you felt over the split that you had with your father. And you have to go the distance in order to be able to heal yourself. And so what we find is this story's architecture is absolutely incredible. The binding language of everything in Ray's psyche is baseball. He didn't fall asleep to fairy tales. He tells his daughter that in the very beginning. He fell asleep to baseball stories. So his subconscious and his imagination is a baseball field. Every one of us has an opportunity to mold and build the psyche of the imaginations of our children, knowing that our imagination is our shamanic field. It's the place in which we are going to be able to do all of our healing. And the more that we develop it, the more skills that we have in terms of our imagination and our spiritual intelligence. Ray, for whatever reason, has a baseball field as his subconscious. And the only people who can see things on the field are the people who are a representation of his subconscious. Baseball is the mythology of his inner world.
Who them?
Them. Well, you don't see him?
Karen, honey? What are you watching?
The baseball man.
And the thing is that those who can't see people on the field, they haven't been integrated or they're never going to be integrated into his subconscious. So let's meet the aspects of his subconscious. First, we have Terrence Mann.
I don't give interviews, and I'm no longer a public figure. I just want to be left alone. So piss off.
which means Earthman, just like He-Man. Literally, his name is Earthman. He is the rebellious part of Ray. He is the part that pushed against his father. He says, I just want people to leave me alone. I don't have any more pain to give to anybody. And this is a representation not just of Ray's subconscious, but also of representation of oppressed cultures and marginalized people who have to carry the burden of a lot of pain for everybody else because everybody is taking out the oppression that they feel towards themselves onto external things. So Terrence Mann is a wonderful representation of that. And he speaks of someone who is burdened by idealism, someone who has pursued passion and has paid for it. And he has an identity crisis in and of himself. He is a representation of a rebellious part of Ray that is actually needing to find its identity. We have Shoeless Joe Jackson, who in its most simple form is the one who is trying to facilitate and host the process of this healing that's happening for Ray. He's the one who understands and knows everything, even if he doesn't necessarily play anything other than a hero's representation that will step out when Ray's father can finally step in.
What are you grinning at, you ghost?
If you build it, he will come.
We meet Archie Moonlight Graham, who is a man who dreamt about baseball but became a doctor. He became a healer because real life called him somewhere else. He had patients and a wife and a town that needed him. And Archie Graham is a representation of a father figure who had to choose responsibility as opposed to actually following his dreams. And this is very, very important because Ray criticizes his father, John, for doing the same thing, for choosing responsibilities over dreams. Ray has to grow up. He sees Archie Graham as the responsible one who says, I only played baseball for 5 minutes. It would have been a true tragedy had I only been a doctor for 5 minutes.
I'm Archie Graham.
One of the things that I love about this is that Archie Graham, when he finally gets to come and play baseball, his only play that we see him do is a sacrifice fly. And that is exactly the role that Archie Graham plays in this story. Archie Graham performs the sacrifice fly when he chooses to step across the barrier. He becomes the older version of himself in order to be able to save Karen. And as a result of that, everybody else is reintegrated back and able to see the baseball field in a very different way because the healing has occurred in a huge way with Archie Graham choosing to be the sacrifice fly that's going to save the field.
Wouldn't wait for me one day, would you, boy?
Okay, Doc.
Just a little aside. Mark is the wealthy brother-in-law, and he represents responsibility without a soul and a care for money, which Ray has never had. Mark is completely unintegrated for the vast majority of the movie, and he is fear dressed up as practicality, and he is controlled at his passing his care, but ultimately, he could have always just given the money to his sister so that she could pay the mortgage, but that wasn't part of the healing. The healing was a recognition that even Mark needed to be integrated into Ray's subconscious. Mark needed to be able to see everybody on the field, and it is when Archie makes the sacrifice. He becomes the sacrifice fly to walk across the barrier that we see. Mark is finally able to see everybody on the field.
When did these ball players get here?
And we recognize that everything that happens in that event when Karen falls off the bleachers and when she starts to choke, all of this is a representation of a tragedy in which Ray's position as a father becomes solidified, in which a massive part of his healing happens in this moment in which he has to choose between Mark, who is showing the voice of doubt, and every other part of his subconscious which has been integrated, which can see the baseball players, all those other parts of his subconscious, Terrence Mann, his wife, his daughter, his inner intuition, and all his inner integrated parts of his subconscious understand that people will come and that they will be able to save and not submit to the fear that Mark is representing. As soon as Karen falls, as soon as something real and tragic happens, Mark is then integrated into Ray's subconscious, and Mark is able to see the players. Ray is held through all of this by Annie. Annie is playful and grounded and supportive, and by his daughter Karen, who, as I said earlier, is a representation of pure intuition. She's the first to see Shoeless Joe. She is the first to be able to sense the future and to say people will come. She sees beyond time in the way that children do before adults tend to talk them out of it. And then after this whole journey, and after he follows every breadcrumb from the universe, Ray is given his true gift, which is his father. Not the wounded father that he remembers, but the father before the pain, the young, hopeful, still dreaming part. Because in many ways, and this is a theme that is continually brought up in the movie, they ask, is this heaven? And they say, no, it's Iowa.
Hey! Is this heaven? No. It's Iowa.
Iowa City in the 70s and the 80s was incredibly progressive. It was a perfect backdrop for this baseball field being in the subconscious. But ultimately, it helps us to recognize and to actually question what is heaven to us. Perhaps heaven is a part of us where memory meets love and time reorganizes, where you can travel to the past, where you can travel to the future. Heaven is a place where we get to re-meet the people and the version of someone before life has hardened them. It's the moment when we see our parents not as gods or as failures, but as souls who also had dreams that they didn't know how to navigate or they didn't have an opportunity to. The Field of Dreams isn't a fantasy, it is actually an instruction, and Ray wants to heal. He is always willing to heal, and he listens to every cue that his inner and outer world gives him. He follows his intuition even when logic collapses, and he stays with the mystery long enough for it to reveal itself. That is crucial, and every one of us can do this. We can travel through time, we can meet what we've abandoned, we can hear the whispers that guide us, and then we can follow synchronicities like they're stepping stones. Ray says, I am scared to death of becoming my father. That fear, that honesty is the doorway that he travels through. He hears the voice and he steps through. And I know this is real. I have lived this. I help people navigate this world. I have felt the universe rearrange reality when I choose trust over fear, and I have watched love organize chaos. It is truly a magical thing, and this movie describes it so well. Everything inside us wants to return to wholeness as long as we can listen. Our pain shows us what we're still holding on to, and suffering reveals what still needs to be seen. In the final scene, we are given the most grounded version of what it might feel like to reunite with a dead parent. Ray has walked through time, he has played baseball with ghosts, and he still never truly expects his father, even at the end. And when he is finally revealed, when Shoeless Joe steps back as the proxy for John Kinsella, for Ray's father, and John Kinsella is actually able to step forward. First, they begin as strangers. They shake hands. They call each other John and Ray. And then it's only when John turns to leave that Ray finally says it. He finally heals this last part of us. He calls him Dad.
Hey, Dad? You want to have a catch?
And what follows is probably the most heart-wrenching and satisfying game of catch that has ever been on film, and is lifted even higher by James Horner's score. Upon rewatching the film, you can see that the voice and the synchronicities were always pointing to John and Ray's reunion, because the place of pain for Ray was the fear that he would become his father. And in the end, he realized the humanity of his father, the fallibility, and the dreams that his father had, but were never able to come to fruition. He even recognizes that his father's dreams he tried to play out through his son, which is so often what we see to happen. It doesn't mean he doesn't have dreams. And that healing allows Ray to come to peace. This is Movies from Beyond. I'm Kristina Wiltsee. A life alchemist means that I help people navigate their subconscious, and I help them see how it shapes the world that we live around them, just like in the Field of Dreams. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. And if you feel called, you can support my editor and I by buying us a coffee with a link in my bio. Thanks, guys.